Good evening, Praise Chapel, and all of those of you tuning in. We're so excited you've joined us tonight. Got a lot of things that are happening here that we want to alert you guys of what we're working on and getting closer towards opening our doors. So we have a soft open date for those that are wondering. We'll open it up to the congregation as of February 28th. Why 2 weeks, you may ask? There's a lot of work that goes into actually formulating a system that you guys can take part in, that you guys can alert us of, and so we can make sure that we're socially distancing as well as following with our illness and injury prevention program, which is what we have filed to make sure that, we're in compliance with CDC and WHO. So the first thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a reservation website. So you will go to praisechapelfresno.com. You'll see something that tells you reserve here. It will take you to a website. You'll have to enter your name and email address, your phone number, a cell phone most likely, and then you'll be able to select the seats. Reservations will open Sundays at 12:01 p.m. in the afternoon after we get through our service, and they will close off Friday at 5 p.m. so that we can set up on Saturday and make sure that everything is sanitized for the groups that are there. So once that goes live on the 28th, we have to have our website linked to it. We have to get the reservation website set up and get it going and make sure that it's running well so that we don't have any hiccups. We are limited, though, to the amount of seating we have available. There will be a seating of 41 people, but we have to minus out the people that are having to be here to make sure that the service can continue to run, so that of the praise team, the speaker, as well as anyone that is in crowd control will have to make sure that they are in there. So we're going to have about 30 seats open, 30 to 32 seats open for each service. Now, if we start over-reserving and we can't get everyone in at one time that wants to be here, then we will, we'll, of course, go to multiple services, in which case, maybe starting earlier, and so we're all out in the same amount of time. But that's all coming up. So just so that you guys know, we do have the system in place. We are working on it. We're getting it running. We're going to test it out this Sunday coming up, but then it's going to be opened up to the congregation as of February 28th. So as soon as our service ends on the 21st, the website will be up and ready to go. You can go and make your reservations for the 28th. So if you are housed together and you're reserving together, we can seat you together. But if you are reserving for other individuals, they will still have to be separated. If you have more family members than you see seats available on the map, click as many seats that are open that you need, and we will group you guys together if you guys are all housed together per CDC and WHO guidelines. So that's all up and coming. We're going to reopen on the 28th, but it is going to be through a reservation system. And we will, the doors will be closed, and then at 9:30 we'll start seating. We still have to screen everyone, so we will do one at a time. We'll bring you in, screen you, seat you. Someone else will bring the next group in, screen you, seat you. It's going to be a process we're going to have to get used to. Hopefully it won't be around for too long, but we've really invested in the work and the time and the effort to make sure that you guys that want to take part in a physical service have a great experience here at Praise Chapel Fresno. Don't forget, you can continue to contribute, continue to give financial contributions to this church via Easy Tithe on your smartphone. You can also go to easytithe.com, look up Praise Chapel Fresno. It'll take you to our website, or you can go to praisechapelfresno.com, click the upper right-hand menu button. It'll take you down. You'll see Give, and it'll take you to a safe and secure website that you can give. Or you can continue to drop off, mail in your tithes, your offerings here at the church, the physical address. If you don't know our address, go ahead and Google us. You'll see it, and we'll make sure that it gets deposited, gets out, and deposited in a timely manner. So that's kind of all of our business. I will repeat our soft open that we're going to be having here at the end of our discussion tonight. So just bear with us, okay? So we're still continuing on. We broke last week to talk about taxes. We got a lot of great feedback from them. A lot of people thanking us for the information. That's also up on YouTube. So if you missed last Wednesday and you want to hear from an expert that deals in strict financial law, CPA, who's built a practice of her own based off of this, go to YouTube and look up Praise Chapel Fresno and look up we sort it by date, and we were just talking about taxes preparation and how to everything that's changing, all the laws and everything. So go there. But we broke off of that. Now we're getting back into it. We're starting off we're continuing on in our short stories, the 5 shortest books of the Bible. So not last Wednesday, but the Wednesday before that, we talked about the book of Jude, and today we're talking about the book of Obadiah. It's in the Old Testament, and not a lot of people actually speak through the book of Obadiah, but it's chocked with some really great information. It's really dark. These short stories are like super dark, but it is the 4th book of the 12 minor prophets in the Old Testament. Now, there's some questions as to who actually authored the book. We know it's a guy named Obadiah, but there are several ones that are mentioned. There's some cross-referencing that's going on in between Scripture. So we're not exactly sure who it is, but it is one chapter, again, and it's only 21 verses, about 440 words. So again, it feels good to get through an entire book of it and say I read an entire book of the Bible. It is the shortest book of the Old Testament. So I'm going to get into this. So the book is listed as an oracle concerning divine judgment. God is speaking through Obadiah to pronounce judgment against a city. The city is called Edom. Now, Edom was founded by Esau, the same guy that sold his birthright for a bowl of soup. That's Esau. He founded Edom, and Jacob, his brother, whom took his birthright, he would be renamed Israel. That's where the Israelites come from. So it's Jacob and Esau fighting against one another. This is kind of spilled out over it. So when you kind of get into the beginning of the book, you have to know some context to it. And number one is that the Edomites, they were helping Babylon against Israel. They were helping them loot the city against Judah. Through this book, God pronounces judgment against the Edomites. Now, he basically says throughout the entire book that he's going to wipe out the house of Esau forever, that there would be no remnant of them, that throughout all of history, no one will ever again find an Edomite or the city of Esau. Now, when you fast forward through this, when you start looking at history, you find out that very shortly after this book was written, Edom gets possessed by Egypt, and then it gets crushed by Rome. So basically, very shortly after this is written, it comes to pass. And then basically what ends up happening is Israel, when they were released from Babylonian exile, they return back there, and then they possess the land of Edom. So let's just jump into it. We're looking at, I'm reading through the New International Version. I've read 3 different versions, and I found that the NIV was was kind of the easiest to understand what was actually going on. There's some there and thous and thuses that are in the Old Testament and the New King James that I kind of gravitated more towards the New International Version that made it a bit easier to understand. And so this is what it says. The vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. We have heard a message from the Lord as envoy was sent to the nations, say, rise, let us go against her for battle. So Obadiah, when you break his name down, it means worshiper or servant of Yahweh. He's reminding all who are hearing his words or those that are reading this scripture that he's a simple servant of God, that his humility is under God, and he's only acting on this. He's a man of Judah, and he's under the influence of the Spirit of God, but this is kind of different from how God has spoken previously through his prophets. So usually the prophets are speaking to Israel, but in this time, God is using Obadiah. He's speaking directly to Edom. And he's directing everything he's saying to the Edomites. So let's go to verses 2 through 4. And it says this, see, I will make you small among the nations, and you will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you. Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. So basically what's ended up happening here is that Edom, the people of Edom, are basically blinded in their pride. They're a smaller nation, and they've been kind of, picking and choosing their battles. They've been gathering allies, and they basically feel invincible. There's a reason for that. It's the land in which they occupied is very difficult. If there was an enemy that was to attack them, it's very difficult. They had some very learned individuals that were living within their city, so they basically, they allowed their pride to blind them. Everything, they start believing everything that they're saying about themselves. They're hearing the voice of God tell them that their destruction is near, and yet they believe themselves to be far more powerful than God. See, pride is one of the most destructive forces in our lives. It's deceptive. It makes us believe, it makes us think we're actually greater than we are. It begins to validate the lies that we tell ourselves. And I found that to be one of the greatest weapons of pride is really people begin to believe exactly what they say about themselves. And a lot of times, that's what humility does. Humility allows us to recognize where we have fault and failure. It doesn't allow us to say we don't need help anywhere. And that's what pride begins to do. It begins to seclude us away from the fact that we need help to move forward. Now, what's funny is that Edom, this tiny little insignificant nation, and yet they find themselves exalting themselves. It says you've built your nest up with the eagles. It's saying that they believe themselves higher than anyone else, and yet they're still kind of a small nation. Pride doesn't care about what you're lacking. It only cares that you have more than the next person. And that's what they begin to believe about themselves. Every time they saw a nation that was greater, it would be, well, let them come after us. We can still defeat because we have high ground. We can still defeat because it's hard to get into our city. They didn't believe that they were as small as they were because of their position, because they were backed in this little corner, and they said, come at me, bruh. Pride doesn't care about it. The nation believes that the position and the knowledge are impenetrable, so they convince themselves that they are invincible. See, pride is a spiritual disease. I believe it's actually put down as pride is a spiritual cancer, in that it eats away at contentment, it eats away at our connections with other believers. And one of the most prominent symptoms, if you're ever thinking, am I really being affected by pride? Think about it this way. It's when you're more concerned with who is right rather than what is right. And I find that a lot. I've been in discussions. I've done these things with some college students that were at Fresno Pacific University, where we discuss these things. And when they begin to bicker amongst themselves as who is right, they're less concerned with what the Word says and more concerned with my interpretation is correct. That's our pride that begins to block us off from fellow believers. Humility says, you may know more than I. You may know. And when they give you something that doesn't quite mesh with it, you don't point out a fault and you say you don't understand what you're talking about. We simply say, that's nice, and you go back and you research it for yourself. Let's look at verses 5 through 7. And it says this, if thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what a disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? But oh, how Esau will be ransacked, his hidden treasures pillaged. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. And those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. Now, what Obadiah is telling Edom today, what he's telling them is he's telling them they're going to be completely destroyed. This isn't like a robber is going to come in. So what they're saying is whenever they were dealing with bandits or robbers of those times, they only took what they could carry and get away with quickly. So, if someone breaks in your home, they're not going to worry about a 75-inch plasma screen TV that is bolted up to a wall. They're going to look at what they can just grab and run away with. So you're still going to be left with some possessions. That's the whole point of him saying, if they come in and they steal from your vines, would they not leave a few grapes? Because they can't carry everything with them and make a quick getaway. They're only going to take what they can carry. But he's saying, oh, Edom, everything you've hidden, everything you have, there's going to be nothing left. So he's telling them that these robbers, that this isn't the way it's going to happen, that you're going to be completely decimated. See, the pride of Edom has basically blinded them to the true enemy. They believe themselves so high they can't even see that the enemy has already penetrated in through their defenses because they were their own allies. The traps were being set before this ever got put into motion. See, God is telling Edom, it's not a foreign nation that will be the cause of your destruction. You're going to be destroyed from within. They're so concerned with people attacking them and saying we have the high ground that they allowed the enemy in through the side door by making treaties and allies with people that were rising up against the nation of Israel. That's the true danger of pride. The true danger is that you begin to find yourself surrounded with people that buy into it, that begin to bolster your pride. But what they're really doing is they're taking something from you. See, I always like hanging out with people that do talk, that just love to talk, and I just love to listen, and I just love to hear it because I'm only there because I want to be surrounded by fellow believers. But then when you start getting individuals that come in and they start building other individuals up, that may be for a point that we're saying, well, you're better than what you think you are. But there's some people that their true purpose in life is just to build somebody else up so that they can ride their tail, so that they can get pulled up alongside with them. When what we really should just be concerned about is that we're all following the will of God. And so they've allowed this enemy in, and it's saying the people that are eating your bread, he's telling Edom. And imagine this, there's a prophet of God. Now, Edom still believes in what Israel believes. They still believe in the one true God. They still believe this, and they're hearing it come from Obadiah, and he's telling them the enemy sits at your dinner table. Your pride has blinded you to this, and they still do nothing about it. And we know this because it doesn't say it through the book of Obadiah, but we know this through history that Edom is destroyed from within. It's destroyed by its own allies. And let's go to verses, I'll kind of summarize through 8 and 9. In verses 8 and 9, he's continuing to underline their destruction, and then God tells them why they deserve this. What we have to understand is that just as our salvation is, when we come to God, salvation has to be accepted. Well, just as it says the wages of sin is death, that means it's earned. The judgment of God is earned. It's not something that God just decides, just at any point in time to judge an entire nation of people. It's earned. And the way it's earned is they were attacking the people of God. Not just were they attacking the people of God, but let's read further. Let's look at verse 10. It says, because of your violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. So he's reminding Edom that they're fighting against their own blood. Jacob and Esau, fathered by Isaac, and yet Edom has directed the nature of its brutality against Israel. And here God is saying, you are the enemy of my people, and you will be destroyed forever. So what ends up happening is Edom kind of sits in the background, and I'll go over this in a little bit later, but they sit in the background. They allow things to happen, and then when people from Judah or Israel begins to break off and get away, they capture them and turn them back into to their captives. Like they're just being really brutal towards this nation, and yet they're all descended from the same from the same forefathers. They have Esau and Jacob. They're from the same bloodline, but yet the Edomites just find a way to torture Israel at every turn. So let's, in verses 12 through 14, it further explains why the judgment is being brought. It's just kind of giving some examples of what they've been doing against them. And he's telling them that this isn't just towards the leaders of Edom, it is towards the entire nation of Edom. See, as I said, the wrath of God is earned. They're fighting against their own family. And when Judah was attacked, they did nothing at first. So when Judah first gets attacked, they do nothing. And then they begin to cheer on the misery of Judah. They begin to rejoice in their misfortune and their suffering. And then once they were removed from their land, Judah goes in and kind of plunders what was left. They take everything else from them after their destruction. Then at one point, Edom even joins in and begins to attack the nation of Judah as they start to break off and break away from the Babylonians. They begin to attack and kind of round them up and give them back to the Babylonians. And as I was writing this just has kind of started hitting me that sin is a lot. Like if we look at pride, like pride is a sin. If we look at this, we look at sin. If it is not repented, if it is not covered in the blood, it progresses in levels. So the very first thing that happens is we have ignorance of the presence of sin. See, Edom didn't know their enemy was sitting at their own table with them. So when we look at this, we say the first portion of how sin begins to progress is, number one, is we become blind to sin even happening. We're ignoring the presence of sin. Then it progresses into cheering it on, meaning we may not be taking part in it, but we're not saying anything about it. We may see fellow people in sin, and we're not going over and telling them anything. We're just kind of like, yeah, let them do them. I'm going to do me, you do you. And then it becomes an encouraging others to partake in it or through inaction. That's the progression. So we ignore it, and then once we kind of see it, we don't really do anything about it, and then it progresses into being around others while in their sin. And that's kind of one of the main points that some Christians will say, well, I'm going to get around them and I'm going to preach from within inside the circle. Well, you better bring some backup with you because that's not the way it really works. You get surrounded by people in sin, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to get drawn right back into that sin if you're not spiritually sound, which is why it's great to have other fellow believers around you when you need to get into these situations because we can keep each other in check. We can make sure that we're all following the will of God. But that's what ends up happening. It's a progression. It's ignorance, inaction, and then bam, we're drawn into it. And people always say, like, I have no idea how I ended up in this situation. But when they start talking it out, when they start discussing what actually happened, it happens in those 3 steps. I ignored it, and then I saw it and did nothing about it, and then all of a sudden, bam, I'm in it. See, God gave Edom a roadmap of their destruction. And here we can see that first step, the first step they took was ignoring that they had enemies amongst them. We're called to love everyone, saved and sinner alike, but we are warned here through Obadiah. It says, do not become ignorant to the fact that sin is around you. We always have to be on our guard. And he's telling Edom, it's because of your ignorance. It's because of your pride has blinded you that you've allowed an enemy in. Let's look at verse 15. Then it says, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon you, will return upon your own head. So after Obadiah basically announces this judgment, the laws of God's retribution, the one rule to his righteousness, as you have done, it will be done to you. How many of us tonight would be comfortable with God pronouncing that judgment against us? I personally wouldn't. I got a lot to work on in my life to where I'm treating individuals, everyone that I come into contact with the same love and respect that they deserve. And I think here, if we were to hear this from God, if God were to tell us that as you have treated, it'll be on your own head. It'll be treated back to you. I think a lot of us might walk away from that a bit terrified of what's about to happen. So that just really tells us the golden rule of treat others as you want to be treated. God just really underlines that here through the book of Obadiah, saying treat others and it's going to be treated unto you. Let's look at verses 17 and 18 now. But on Mount Zion you will be delivered. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance. Jacob will be a fire, and Joseph will be a flame. Esau will be the stubble, and they will set him on fire and destroy him. There will be no survivors from Esau. The Lord has spoken. See, God extends his mercy to those who obey. You may feel like you're being destroyed. You may feel desolate. You may feel like you're surrounded by an enemy. But God says to those who hear my voice and follow my direction, you're being led to Mount Zion. You're being led to the place that God dwells, where he's chosen to dwell. He's not drawing you into danger. He's not drawing you further out. He's drawing you to where he is dwelling. I love this. It says, Jacob will possess his inheritance. See, the enemy comes back and he starts hitting at us. He comes back and forth, trying to take piece after piece, trying to wear us down. And God says, everything that I've promised you, regardless of what the enemy has taken, I will restore through the place that I dwell. But you have to follow the voice. So he says, yes, the enemy may have taken your sons, your daughters. They may have taken pieces from you. But when you follow my voice and you return to the Mount Zion, when you return to where God dwells and you follow his voice, he says, I will restore everything that I've promised to you. Then the closing remark is the seal. And this should be one of the most terrifying things that this nation had ever heard. And if anyone ever is speaking any rebuke in my life and ends it with the same way that he ends this verse, I would be terrified. He ends it with the Lord has spoken. Now, when the Lord speaks, that is it. The Alpha and Omega has spoken. It is you're no longer able to turn from that. You're no longer able to do this. He says, you'll find retribution. You will find restoration through Mount Zion. But if you do not, the Lord has spoken. It's destruction. When the Lord speaks, the Bible tells us the bowels of hell begin to shake. At the word of the Lord, the earth begins to move. See, we don't need to fight. We don't need to argue. And we don't need to push or pull. All we simply need to wait on is the word of the Alpha and the Omega. You think, well, I have to educate people. I have to go out and tell people that are speaking against us to say, that God is true, that God is real, and that He changes lives. And yes, we need to do that. But look, there's going to be a day where it says, the Lord has spoken, and that is the end. Let's look at verses 18 through 20. He's listing out how the land is going to be divided. So he ends the prophecy with saying, the Lord has spoken. Bam, that's the seal. That's it for Edom. And then he begins to speak, and he's talking about this. Obadiah is standing before the Edomites, and he's talking about how their land is going to be divided up. And they're not doing anything against them. This is just happening, and he's talking about who's going to govern what lands, what tribe is going to lay in what area. He's doing this. Now, when you look at Obadiah 1:21, the end of the verse, it says this: deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. See, the word of the Lord was fulfilled not long after these words are there. So they get kind of occupied by Egypt, and they get destroyed by the Romans. As with all instances of God's judgment, the end goal was restoration and reconciliation. This was not about revenge. And people look at this and they say, well, God will have His revenge. God will do this. No, God doesn't. God's not about revenge. He's about restoration and reconciliation. But when there are people that actively rise up against Him and His people, God executes this judgment. And look at some of these countries that that rose up against these nations. And I mean, that should be a big warning to any governmental agency or any world government that is attempting to control or to stand up against the one true God, because every single one of those nations that did it no longer exist. The word of the Lord will be fulfilled. Though God speaks of the destruction of His enemies of Israel, the book ends on a note of hope. And it says restoration, reconciliation, hope. Hope that God will preserve and restore His people, and that there is no enemy, no tactic that can stand against the kingdom of God. So if you were to summarize this book up, if you were to look at the book of Obadiah and say, what is it telling? The central message is warning about the dangers and destruction that follow pride. It tells us that pride blinds us, that pride allows our enemies to come in the midst of ourselves because we don't see the need to be helped. We don't see the need for God. We simply see that we can handle what we're going through. And so the enemy begins to creep in. And that's what this book is warning us against. It's saying, stay humble, stay faithful, stay dependent upon God, and the enemy has no root into your life. For in the will of God, everything the enemy has taken will be restored. Such a simple book, such a short book, but such amazing things that it tells, such amazing things that it's speaking about. And when you start researching into the country of Edom and what Obadiah meant and what he was doing right there, what happens before and after, you start finding out it's this really pivotal time that God is rising His people, that He's building His people up. But again, He's building His people up, but He's destroying their enemies. So while we're being built, while God is continuing to build us, He's not just protecting us from our enemies, He's destroying these enemies. So that's the book of Obadiah. Short, sweet, 21 verses, 440 words. Read it sometime when you have a chance. Trust me, it'll continue to bless your lives. So we thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to kind of go over this again. We have a soft open happening Good Lord. February 28th, 2021. First service, 10 o'clock a.m. There will be a reservation system, so stay tuned to our Instagram and to our Facebook. And you'll see exactly how to go through that. There will be a link that will be attached to our website that will tell you about reservations. So you'll be able to walk through, but that won't be up until after the 21st. And it won't be open to the congregation until that actually happens. So after the 21st, we'll announce it that you can go in and you can make your reservations for the next Sunday service. It is limited seating because we have to maintain 6-foot social distancing, which we've done with the chairs. A lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of money has gone into this. So again, we continue to ask for your financial contributions to give you an easy tithe on your smartphone, or to go to our website, praisechapelfresno.com. You can click the button that says give. It'll take you to a safe and secure website that you can give, or you can continue to drop off, mail in your tithes, your offerings here at the physical address of the building. We'll make sure it gets a deposit in a timely manner. So 28th, 10 o'clock will be our first congregational service that will be open. But again, it's going to be limited seating through a reservation system. Should we not be able to get everybody in at one point, as we see a need for it, we will add a second service. So that way, all those that want to partake can partake. We can fit 32 people in the building. That's minus all the people it takes to actually run the service. We have to remain below 25% occupancy of what we're allowed to have in the building. And we're doing that great. It's going to be a great time. We're going to have a fun time, but it's going to be great to see some of you guys coming back to the building that feel comfortable. We'll also have a family room available. It can seat up to 12 people. So for those of you that may have a few kids that may not want to bring them because you're afraid they may disrupt the service, we will have a room available for you here at the church set up to keep your kids entertained, as well as continue to keep you connected to the service and here in the facility. So don't let that be an issue. If you want to reserve that room, the family room, you'll have to direct message us and let us know how many you're going to be bringing and on what service. But other than that, we love you guys. We thank you for tuning in tonight, and we can't wait to see you guys on the 28th of February for our first service after you've reserved your seats. We love you. We'll see you this Sunday, 10 o'clock, live casted.